Well, now, pull up a chair. Let me tell you a story about a couple named Frank and Eleanor. You know, in my 30-odd years of sitting across from folks, I've seen two kinds of terror. There's a loud kind, the 2008 crash, people yelling into their phones, sheer panic as the numbers go red. But there's a second kind, a much quieter, and if you ask me, a much more dangerous kind of terror. It's the terror of the almost. It's the couple in their late 50s who did everything they were told to do. They bought the house, raised the kids, put in their 30 years at the office, and then, with the finish line in sight, they look at each other and realize in a cold, silent dread that it's not going to be enough. That was Frank and Eleanor. They were 58 years old when they first walked into my office, and they were terrified. They had what you'd call a perfect life in one of those lovely suburbs outside of Chicago, a nice colonial. Two successful kids launched into the world, a garden Eleanor was famous for. But behind that white picket fence, their retirement dream wasn't just stalling. It was on the verge of collapsing. They were drowning, and they didn't even know which way was up. Frank was an engineer, a brilliant man in his field. He designed components for medical devices. He was a classic set-it-and-forget-it guy. He'd set up his 401k contributions back in 1995 and hadn't looked at them since. Outside of the quarterly statements he'd file away in a drawer. "It's for the long run, Grandpa," he told me. "I don't like to tinker." Eleanor had been a high school English teacher before she left to raise their children. She was a family's heart, but also its chief worrier. She managed a checkbook, paid the bills, and for the last 10 years, she'd felt this growing, nameless anxiety. Their income was good, but the outgo just seemed to evaporate. On paper, they looked fine. Their house was worth a good $600,000, nearly paid off. And when I finally had them pull all their statements, they had about $750,000 in retirement funds. "See," Frank said a little defensively, "we're fine. 750. That's a good number, right?" Eleanor just twisted the strap of her purse. She's the one who brought the other file. The one Frank didn't like to talk about. It was a stack of credit card statements. $42,000 in high-interest debt. "It was the kitchen," Eleanor said, her voice barely a whisper. "We remodeled it 3 years ago. We thought we'd pay it off right away." Frank chimed in, "And then the roof needed replacing. And then our son, Mark, had that gap between jobs. It just piled up." I looked at the statements. 22.9% APR. I did the math in my head. They were paying nearly $10,000 a year, just in interest. They weren't paying down the debt. They were just treading water, and the bank was getting rich. Here they were, 58 years old, saving 10% into their 401k, asked to hopefully make 7 to 8% a year, while simultaneously losing a guaranteed 22.9% on the other side of the ledger. It was like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain wide open. "So what brought you in?" I asked. People don't usually come to see me when things are fine. They come when something breaks. Eleanor's eyes welled up. She looked at Frank, who just stared at his hands. "It was Bill," Frank said. Bill was his colleague. A few years older, 63. He had a stroke. A bad one. "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that," I said. He's okay mostly," Frank continued. "But he can't work. Not like he did. They're forcing him into early retirement." And his wife, Susan, called Eleanor last week just crying. Eleanor picked up the story. "They have nothing, Grandpa. Bill was a work till 70 guy. They were going to use his last few big earning years to get serious about saving. They have a mortgage. They have car payments." Susan, she said they might have to sell the house. He worked for 40 years, and he's going to end up on Medicaid. That phone call was the crack in the dam. The terror of almost had become the terror of right now. For the first time, Frank and Eleanor looked at their own situation with cold, hard clarity. The scattered 401k-s, the massive, bleeding credit card debt, the lifestyle that had quietly crept up on them, eating every raise and bonus for the last 15 years. The vague, foggy notion of we'll retire someday suddenly met the brick-wall reality of Bill's stroke. They weren't 30 anymore. They didn't have 30 more years to fix it. The long run was suddenly very, very short. We're stuck, aren't we? Frank asked, his engineering confidence completely gone. We have to work until we die, just like Bill. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then I leaned forward. No, I said, you're not stuck. You're just unconscious. And you've been unconscious for a very long time. My job isn't to be your financial advisor. My job is to be your wake-up call. I told them, what we're going to do is a financial triage. We're not looking at 10-year plans. We're going to fix this, and we're going to fix it in 6 months. It will be the hardest financial work you've ever done, but if you do it, you will get your future back. They looked at each other. Then they both nodded. Okay, Frank said. What's month one? This is the part of the story I like to tell, because it's not about some magical stock pick or a complicated annuity. It's about rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work. It's about fundamentals. Month one, defining the why. I didn't start with a spreadsheet. I started with a yellow legal pad. Forget the numbers for a second, I said. Eleanor, Frank, what do you want? What does a rich life actually look like to you? Not to your neighbors, not to your kids, to you. They were completely stunned. No advisor had ever asked them that. Frank stammered. Well, I want it to not work. Not good enough. I said, gently, that's what you're running from. What are you running to? We spent the next hour, the entire hour, talking. And what came out was beautiful. They didn't want a yacht. They didn't want a condo in Florida. Frank, it turned out, wanted a workshop. He wanted to build custom furniture. He'd been sketching designs in notebooks for 20 years. Eleanor wanted to see her grandkids in Seattle more than twice a year, and she wanted to take a master gardener course at the local college. That's it, Eleanor said. A workshop for Frank. More trips to Seattle. And my garden. That's our rich life. Good, I said, writing it down. Now, let's look at where your money is actually going. We didn't do a budget. I hate that word. A budget is a diet. It's about deprivation. We did a conscious spending plan. We found the leaks. And they were gushers. $180 per month in subscription boxes, wine, artisan cheese magazines they never used. $650/month on a lease for a luxury SUV that Frank hated driving. $1, $200/month on average on restaurants and takeout. We're just so tired after work, Eleanor confessed. They were spending over $2,000 a month on things they didn't even like, all while that $42,000 debt monster was eating them alive. So, I said, month one is this. We are not spending a single dollar on anything that isn't Frank's workshop, or Seattle grandkids, or Eleanor's garden. And we are not spending it until the monster is dead. For the first time, I saw a spark. They weren't just cutting back. They were redirecting. They were trading unconscious waste for a conscious future. Month two, slaying the monster. Month two was all about the $42,000. It was the elephant in the room, and it had to go. We can't, Frank said. It would take us 5 years to pay that off with what we're saving. We don't have 5 years, I said. We're going to kill it in 30 days. Frank looked at me like I was insane. How? We don't have $42,000 in cash. No, I said, but you have $750,000 in your 401k-s. We're going to perform surgery. I explained the plan. We would take a $42,000 401k loan from Frank's account. But that's retirement money. Eleanor protested. You're not supposed to ever touch that. Eleanor, I said, you are currently losing a guaranteed 22.9% to the credit card company. There is no investment on earth that will safely, legally, and ethically make you 22.9%. We are taking money out of an account that might make 8% and using it to pay off a debt that is guaranteed to cost you 22.9%. It's not a withdrawal. It's an arbitrage. It's the single greatest financial return you will ever get. We set it up so the loan payments, with interest paid back to himself, would come directly out of his paycheck. The amount they were paying back to his own 401k was less than the interest-only payments they had been hemorrhaging to the bank. A week later, Eleanor called me. She was weeping. What's wrong? I asked, my heart sinking. It's zero, she said. I logged into the credit card account. The balance is zero. For the first time in 10 years. We're free. They weren't just free. They had just given themselves a $10,000 a year raise just by stopping the interest payments. And that money was now available to move to the next step. Month 3, consolidate and automate. With the bleeding stopped, it was time to build muscle. I had them bring in the statements for everything. It was a mess. Frank's current 401k, and an old 401k from a job he'd left in 2002, sitting in a high-fee stable value fund, Eleanor's old 403b from her teaching days, invested in high-cost, actively managed mutual funds 0.2 small, forgotten IRAs they'd started in the 90s. You don't have a portfolio, I told them. You have a garage sale. We spent month 3 consolidating. We rolled everything. The old 401k, the 403b, the IRAs, into a single low-cost rollover IRA. We put all into a simple 3-fund lazy portfolio of total market index funds. We got their average fees down from over 1.1% to 0.05%. Another instant raise. Then we took that $2,000 plus they'd found in month 1 from cutting the subscriptions and the restaurant habit. We maxed out their catch-up contributions. We set it all up to happen automatically the day after their paychecks hit. As Warren Buffett says, do not save what is left after spending. Instead, spend what is left after saving. For the first time in their lives, Frank and Eleanor were finally, truly, paying themselves first. Month 4, the money date. This was the hardest part. The psychology. You too, I said, are going to have a money date. Every Sunday night. 30 minutes. You're not allowed to blame. You're not allowed to dredge up the past. You're only allowed to talk about the plan and the dream. The first one was a disaster. Frank got defensive. Eleanor got anxious. They called me Monday, ready to quit. Why is this so hard? Frank fumed. It's just numbers. It's never just numbers. I said, Frank, what did your father teach you about money? He paused. He said, you work till you drop. He was a foreman at a plant. He died at 68, 2 years after he retired. He hated retirement. And there it is, I said, you invisible script. You believe deep down that retirement is a form of death, that to stop working is to stop living. No wonder you never planned for it. You've been unconsciously avoiding it. And Eleanor, I turned to her, what did your family say? We never talked about it, she said. It was impolite. It was my father's job. We were just supposed to trust. And your invisible script is talking about money is scary and causes fights. So you worry silently, which Frank feels as a lack of faith. He gets defensive, you get more scared. It's a perfect vicious circle. That was the breakthrough. That night, they had their second money date. They didn't talk about the 401k. They talked about Frank's dad. They talked about Eleanor's fear. They started to understand why they had been stuck. They were finally on the same team. Month 5, negotiating the exit. Month 5 arrived. Their debt was gone. Their savings were automated. Their psychological baggage was at least checked. Now, we had to look at the income side. I can't just ask for a raise, Frank said. I'm 58. They're probably looking for ways to get rid of me. Then don't ask for a raise, I said. Don't ask for more money. Ask for a better life. Go to your boss and propose a phased retirement and knowledge transfer plan. He was intrigued. You're one of their most senior engineers. I laid out. You have 30 years of knowledge in your head. That's their biggest liability, you walking out the door. So make them a deal. You offer to stay on for 5 more years, not 7. But for the last 3 of those years, you'll move to a 3-day work week. You'll dedicate those 3 days entirely to mentoring your replacement. You give them a seamless transition. You get to test drive retirement, and you keep an income stream, which lets your nest egg grow. Frank spent a week polishing the proposal. He went in terrified. His boss loved it. They were terrified of him retiring. They countered. 20% raise now to thank him for the idea, and the 3-day week plan would kick in at age 62, at 60% of his new, higher salary. Frank walked out of that office 10 feet tall. He hadn't just gotten a raise. He had negotiated his own freedom. He had built his own glide path out of workforce. Month 6, the new reality. 6 months after they first walked into my office, Frank and Eleanor sat on my sofa again. They looked different, lighter. Eleanor pulled out a single sheet of paper. Debt, $0 emergency fund. In a high-yield savings account, $20. 000 consolidated retirement savings, $810,000. The market had been kind, and their new contributions were pouring in. Written phase retirement plan. In Frank's briefcase, budget for Master Gardener course. Taped to their fridge, plane tickets to Seattle, booked for the following month. It's real, Frank said, looking at the paper. We did it. Frank and Eleanor didn't retire at 59. They didn't need to. They didn't want to. The old all-or-nothing retirement cliff had terrified them. But their new plan, this glide path they had built, it was exciting. Frank worked full-time at his new, higher salary until 62. Those extra years of maxing out their savings with no debt payments supercharged their nest egg. When he hit 62, he dropped to 3 days a week. He spent his new off days, Tuesday and Thursday, setting up the workshop in his garage. Eleanor took her gardening course. She started a small side business designing and planting container gardens for local businesses. It made them an extra $8,000 a year, which they dubbed the Seattle Fund. They decided to wait until 70 to take Social Security. Frank's part-time income and Eleanor's small business, combined with a small, strategic drawdown from their IRA, more than covered their new conscious spending lifestyle. By letting their Social Security benefits grow, they gave themselves an 8% raise for every year they waited, guaranteed by the government. When Frank finally, fully retired at 65, he didn't fall into a depression like his father. He just woke up on a Tuesday and went to his workshop instead of the office. It was seamless. They had $1.4 million in their retirement accounts. They had 2 maxed-out Social Security checks. And they had a life they had designed on purpose. It's never, ever too late. Frank and Eleanor walked into my office at 58, thinking the game was over. But they had the single most powerful asset on their side, a paycheck. So many folks in their 50s think it's too late to save, so they just don't. They keep spending, figuring they'll just work forever. But those last 5 to 10 years of your career, that's when your earnings are highest. That's when your kids are gone. That is your power-saving window. Don't waste it. What Frank and Eleanor did wasn't magic. They defined their why. They stopped spending money on things they didn't care about to free up money for the things they did. They stopped the bleeding. That 22.9% credit card debt was a cancer. You cannot build wealth when you have that kind of guaranteed loss. As the great Charlie Munger said, if you're not paying off your credit card debt, you're just paying a stupid tax to someone else. Frank and Eleanor stopped paying the stupid tax. They traded complexity for simplicity. They got rid of their high-fee, scattered garage sale of funds and bought the whole low-cost market. They automated it. They put their wealth building on autopilot. They built a glide path, not a cliff. The old idea of working 40 hours a week for 40 years and then stopping is a psychological and financial shock to the system. Frank's idea to negotiate his exit was brilliant. It kept his income, kept his mind engaged, and let him ease into the next phase of his life. Don't let that quiet terror, the almost, paralyze you. Don't be fine. Don't be unconscious. Pick your head up. Look the monster in the eye. Whether it's debt or high fees, or just a lack of a plan, you have more power than you think. You can do in 6 months what you've been putting off for 20 years. You just have to decide to wake up.